Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the latest episode of the Hard Compound Live. Thank you very much for tuning in. We've got a few people tuning in already. Thank you very much indeed. For those of you who don't know, my name's Rich. I run and operate the Hard Compound. We like to think we're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport. We do like news and articles, race reports, provide online support for some of the very best young drivers and riders in the UK and Ireland. And as you might have noticed, we also do live interviews. All of our live interviews are obviously live and recorded here on Facebook, Twitter, and on our YouTube channel. We also have an Instagram channel. If you just go on to any of those social media platforms, put in the Hard Compound and we'll come up. So do come on and give us a follow. If you want to check out some of the interviews that we've done, as I said, they're on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. In the videos section. We've been very fortunate to speak with the legend that is Mario Andretti, which was absolutely superb. We've also spoken to some past drivers, the likes of Stefan Johansson, David Brabham, Derek Warwick, Ari Leyendijk, Danny Sullivan. We've spoken with Dick Bennett. We've spoken with Matt Neal. Andy Prio, Tom Coronel, Ian Flux, Shane Byrne from the British Superbike Championship. We've spoken with John Cleland, Steve Soper, Rob Gravitt, and we've spoken with some of the current drivers from the British Touring Car Championship as well, the likes of Chris Smiley, Rick Parfitt, Jade Edwards, Tom Chilton, Jake Hill, and Ollie Jackson. And the last two have a bit of a link to our guest this evening. Gonna again speed things up a bit this evening because our guest has another engagement after we're finished here. So we're going to be on for about an hour or so, give or take. Tonight's guest, former F1 driver, IndyCar race winner of the 24 Hours of Le Mans. He's won at Sebring. Absolute British motorsport legend, and currently the sporting director of MB Motorsport in the British Touring Car Championship. So please join me in welcoming very special guest, Mr. Mark Blundell. There we are. Mr. Blundell, how are you?
I'm very well. Honoured to be on your show. You've had some great guests on this and great names.
Well, yes, thank you. We've been very fortunate to have some amazing people coming on to have a chat. And of course, your good self as well. Absolutely brilliant to have you on. Thank you very much for sparing some time. You know you're very busy, so really appreciate you coming on. So obviously there's been quite a lot going on in the motorsport world, but obviously in the last 18 months it's been very difficult for all of us with COVID and everything. And COVID hit just as you took the reins at MB Motorsport, so to speak. How's the last 18 months been? Quite difficult, I would guess.
I mean, listen, for me, it's not been too bad, but obviously for our drivers at MB Motorsport with the British Touring Car Championship, it's been a little bit strained. And I would also say because of all the drivers that we manage, we've got 9 drivers on our management books, and the travel element has hit some of them hard. It's actually been a bit unfortunate in some ways because it's also affected a couple of their career moves as well. But that's the situation that we're in at the moment. Even with this weekend coming up, Gary Paffett should have been out in the DTM Championship in Zolder. Gary unfortunately can't travel there because of the restrictions still in Belgium. So it's impacting all of our lives, not just motorsport, but everybody. So we're just trying to do the best we can and adapt. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think everyone within motorsport has done very well, whether it's an F1 or the touring cars or IndyCar or, the bikes world. I think everyone's done very well to get through it as best they can. And obviously now we've got the fans back here in the UK, which is obviously from a fan perspective. It's absolutely fantastic. I've managed to get to a couple of events recently at Silverstone and Thruxton, and it's just great to have the fans back, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean the British Grand Prix was brilliant,
wasn't it?
I think Alton Park was superb as well to see. It looked like somewhere in the region of 35 to 40,000 fans at the British Touring Car race. So it's just nice to have the atmosphere of a circuit full of spectators, and not only that, there's the British spectators are just passionate, and they're also educated fans. They know what they're looking at and know what they're on about. So it's great to engage with them and have some conversations which have been sorely missed over the last 18 months or so.
No, here. And long may it continue. Let's hope there's no more backward steps or flip-flopping or anything else like that. We just want to get back to some kind of normality. So stay on, guys. If you are tuning in, just pop a quick hello in the comments. Any questions? We're going to try and get to them. But as I said, we have to rattle through because Mark's got another engagement, so don't want to dwell too long. So, if we may, can we just start right at the start? How did you get into motorsport?
Well, I guess I started on two wheels, which would be the beginning of my motorsport career. I started in schoolboy motocross. 14 years old, I think I was at the time, and that was purely driven off the back of living in a rural area, and that kind of seemed to be the thing that everybody did. They had an old scramble bike or a bike that resembled a scramble bike, and we'd all meet up at the weekends and go and do crazy things on motorcycles. But that went into being then a sport for me in terms of competing in motocross at schoolboy level. We did okay. We were sort of like top 36 ACU rider at schoolboy sort of level, and had the opportunity to go further. But having been around cars most of my life, because my late dad was a second-hand car trader. That's what he did. Right. So I've been sort of telling you what a headlight cluster is or the rear light cluster on a car from a mile away in the dark, because I knew every single car on the road. So
wow,
it was kind of a natural progression to get behind the wheel at some point, which I did in the early years at the tender age of 8 years old, and I was sitting on cushions and driving around the yard. And I think at 9 years old I was already crashing cars. So I'm pretty in tune with that side of things.
Well, I think a lot of us started with cushions and boxes and whatnot. So yeah, no, great to hear. And it's amazing how many people come from the car dealership background. Obviously, we spoke with like Derek Warwick, who I know you're very close with, and that's what he's doing these days. Same with Steve Soper and obviously John Cleland as well. So they've all come on for a chat, and they all love the used cars dealership. So yeah, everyone comes from good stock. Correct if I'm wrong, you didn't go through the karting route, did you? Did you just go? How did that sort of move into the cars and into, excuse me, into was it Formula Fords you first went into, wasn't it? How did that kind of come about?
I mean, basically, a family friend sort of said to us that, look, if you're going to get into motorsport, you need to go and understand what it's about. I started to go to a few races and got the bug for it, but we really didn't have any understanding of what motor racing consisted of, and certainly didn't understand that you had to start at a lower level and work your way up. I was no different than anybody else. I just saw Formula One cars and Grand Prix on TV. We went to the racing car show, which was, I think it was at Alexandra Palace back then, trying to think, many years ago. So, and we met up with a great gentleman called Mike Blanchet, who was like the commercial director at Lola Cars. And coincidentally, we're only sort of 20 minutes away from where I lived. And he said, look, you need to start at the bottom. And the bottom back then was Formula Ford 1600. And, that's where we entered motor racing per se. And, the rest is history kind of thing. But regretfully, Lola Cars is no longer, which is a huge shame. Yes. And, it was a great grounding and a great place to start, and still got very fond memories.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I got into racing a tiny bit later, but I always remember watching the Formula Fords, and it was just absolutely fantastic to watch. It was a Formula Ford festival at Brands Hatch. It was one of the biggest things on TV, and yeah, I just remember cars going everywhere in the wet with young drivers in them, slithering all over the place. But in that first season, you were runner-up in, was it both British Junior Formula Ford Championships? Was that the first year?
Well, we were kind of a little bit sort of a renegade back then, because we broke the mold as such, because people were coming to a Formula Ford race, and doing like a 10 laps champion of brands, and then putting the car back in a trailer and packing up and going home. And on the same day, there maybe were another 3 or 4 events, because you'd get champion of brands, you get Dunlop Star tomorrow, you get the SO Championship. And for us, it was kind of like, okay, well, motocross, we used to do 4 races in a day, so why should we not do it in motorsport? And thinking about it, it was a cost of a bit of fuel, an entry, and a little bit more tyre wear and engine wear. But at the same time, if it went badly wrong, which at times it did, then it was a cost of damage on the car. But what it did do, it fast-tracked my learning curve. And I think once we started to do that, a lot of people followed, and those Formula 4 days were fantastic. They really were. Huge amount of experience gained in a short space of time, and I think I did something like 80 starts in one season, and I think we won like 25 of those, and some other things that we won during that year. We won something back then called the Golden Helmet Award, which was done with Autosport magazine. It literally was just a painted gold helmet. Yeah, nothing's too fancy, but that's all the sport. And I think it was for the most winning British or Commonwealth driver, in that season. So
wow.
I don't even know where that helmet is. I'm not even sure. Maybe someone's walking around with it these days. I've got no clue where it is.
Well, I think it's someone using it. It was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, maybe.
Not sure. Just speaking of helmets, we've got Darren Thipthorpe from the Arai helmets guys, and he said that Mark was pretty quick on a motocross bike, so he obviously remembers you thumping around. And I was going to say a quick hello to Indira Flack from the Great British Racing Drivers exhibit, who I know you've had your photo taken with, and I've seen the exhibit at Silverstone. It's absolutely brilliant. And thank you, Indira. We actually used your photo to promote this, so thank you very much. But if anyone does want to go to Silverstone, Great British Racing Drivers exhibit in the Silverstone Museum Experience, well worth a look. And thank you, Indira, for tuning in. It was great to meet you the other week. So Formula Fords, he stepped up to Formula Ford 2000, having won the Snetterton Formula Ford Championship and the British Formula Ford Championship. And you won the BBC Grandstand Series, which is something I vaguely remember being around. Obviously winning that and having the success beforehand, did that give you like a bit of a shot in the arm? Obviously everyone we've spoken to said that like success breeds confidence at a young age, and was that the same for you, or did you always kind of think, I can do this?
I think success always gives confidence, to anybody, any whether you're in business, whether you're in sport, just life in general. So yes, it does add. I think from that also, that then develops into other pressures that start to build on your shoulders, and either you work with that or you crumble, so to speak. So the early days were fantastic because actually at that point the pressure wasn't there about it being a job. It was fun with a target of trying to succeed and go further up the ladder, but with no understanding that the reality was going to turn out that in 4 years from there, I would be sitting in a Formula One car testing for Williams. So because of that, there was no pressure, and because of that, the enjoyment level was incredible. And those Formula 4 days, I think if you asked all of our guys, myself, Johnny Herbert, Damon Hill, Irvine, Bertram Gasho, Paolo Kakaski, all these guys who were running around, Perry McCarthy, my good friend, we'd all probably say they were some of the best days of our motor racing careers and some of the best racing ever.
Yeah, you mentioned about Perry. He came on and had a chat, I think, about 2 or 3 weeks ago with us, which was obviously a riot, I'm sure you can imagine. And he said the same thing. He absolutely loved just the fun and the, not having any weight on your shoulders. Obviously, it's great to get further up the ladder and possibly financially and career-wise, but you can't be thumping around in a car having a bit of fun. It's great to hear. Made a step up to European. To Formula Ford 2000, and then you went up in. Sorry, you took the European title in Formula Ford 2000. Again, more success, more confidence, everything. How did the step up, I believe in '87, come to F3000? Because that's quite, because you did a bit of F3 and then there was into F3000. That's quite a leap, because F3000 at that time was like the last step before F1, wasn't it?
I guess, again, being a little bit unorthodox in the way that we came about it and the approach, and sort of breaking the mold again. Everyone was sort of saying, you need to go and do F3 now. That's the stepping stone, and that's where you've got to head. But we were already sort of trying to get our heads around, well, firstly, the budget was significant. Secondly, I was still going to be pretty much doing UK circuits. And thirdly, if you weren't in a West Surrey Racing or somebody at that level, you probably weren't going to achieve that much.
Sure.
So because budget was a little bit on the thin side to a certain degree, we kind of felt if we were going to spend money, we might as well spend it as efficiently as possible. And for us at that point, it was like, okay, well, why don't we just have our own team? And that's where we sort of put ourselves into, back then it was called Fleet Ray Racing. So that was, don't ask me where that name came from, but probably a company name on the shelf that just, fitted, and that was that. And we ran a year-old F3000 car. And because it was a year old, it was cheap and cost efficient. We didn't have fuel injection on our engine. We had mechanical injection, and we were getting sort of, spares that were hand-me-down from the factory team. So it was very cost efficient. And that's also the fact of, okay, well, let's just jump straight from Formula 4 2000 to F3000, which at the time I don't think anybody had done. And a lot of people sort of, I think a few people scoured, and a lot of them were like, oh, that's not going to work. But it was also, if you can drive, you can drive. And I'm still a great believer in that. You can chuck some guys in and deep in. And if they can get their heads around it, they'll still be competitive. And thankfully for us, that's what kind of came off. I did do F3 during that year. And the only reason why I did F3 is because we picked up some support from Tom's Toyota. And the fact of the matter is that they paid us to run their car. And with that budget that they paid us, we put that towards the F3000 budget. So
right.
Even back then, still kind of wheeling and dealing, and those wheeling and dealing days are still going on today. So yeah.
No, I didn't realise there was that little link there with the F3, which is excellent. There are some good questions coming in, guys. We will come to those. Just say so that Harry Adams. Good evening, Harry. He said that you're a proper gent. He remembers at the BTCC at Donington, we were stuck for about a minute of saying after you, trying to get through a door. Yeah, obviously. So yeah, thank you, Harry, for tuning in. Much appreciated. We've got a question from a lady called Milana Yevtich. I hope that's correct. We're going to come to that soon. Milana, do bear with us. So you were an F3000. You took second at Spa from my research in that year. Excellent circuit to drive. Everyone who comes on always says that's their favourite circuit. So that must have been nice to stand on the podium there.
It was an interesting race, and I tell you why it was interesting is because I'd actually taken the lead in that race. And the fact of the matter is that I came second because the result was taken the lap before, after the race was red flagged. Because there was a big accident, the top of Eau Rouge, or coming through Eau Rouge and Radium around there. There was a big accident involving Louis Sala, I think it was, and some other driver. So yeah, I just missed out on my debut win in F3000 there. And the other thing about that is that a lot of people didn't know is because we were running our own car and it was such a small little team, we didn't have air guns to change the wheels, tyres. We were still on torque wrenches, and we had to pit because I made the call on tyres. And a guy called Colin Bennett, who was running an F3000 team back then, very gracefully and kindly came down pit lane and lent us his air guns and his air tanks to change tyres to help us out. And very supportive, and I'll never forget those things. So yeah, lots of little stories attached to that race, and as I say, also good as well because we were in a year-old car with mechanical injection, and still sort of did some great things with it. And we used to call that car the Shed. That was its nickname, the Shed. Yeah.
So you came second in Spa in the Shed. Fantastic. We've got like Guillaume Ribeiro said the other driver was a guy called Di Vinuesa, apparently, was the other guy in the accident. So there you go. Excellent knowledge, Guillaume. Thank you for tuning in. I believe you're in Brazil, so thank you for tuning in. Following in 1988, with Lola, if that serves me correctly, and you had podiums at Jerez and at Zolder, which was great, and raced at Suzuka in Japanese F3000. How was it going out to Suzuka? Was that the first time you'd been out there?
Yeah, I mean, we got the opportunity to go to Lola Motorsport and sort of rekindle those relationships that I'd started off, 1984 as my first sort of manufacturer link in Formula Ford. So to go full circle and then be back with them. It was good and bad in some ways because the car quite wasn't where it should have been in terms of competitiveness, and we were just struggling a little bit in terms of budget. But again, the F3000 in Japan was to support the budget contribution, and because back then Japan was very buoyant and funding, and getting paid to drive in an F3000 car was kind of the norm back then, and took the opportunity to go and do that and get some money back into the European side. So, yeah, I mean, young guy going to Japan, obviously a very interesting place. Still great affection for it. In saying that, I think I spent 17 days in one hotel in Tokyo, and hotel rooms are very small in Japan. So there was definitely a case if the window would have opened a bit further, I would have definitely tried to jump because I think I was going a bit stir crazy. But yeah, it was cool. It was cool, but culturally very different and quite a different way of seeing the world in some ways. But yeah, very thankful for it.
Yeah, excellent. Again, 1988. Just very quickly, were you in the race at Brands where like Johnny obviously had that awful accident? Do forgive me. I'm not going to bring age into this. I do apologise, but I was 7. So I do remember it. I remember like Moreno and Foytek and obviously Johnny in the accident. And so like you were in that race. What was your sort of view of it and your thoughts on it? Did you realise it was a bad one? Because it looks dreadful.
Yeah, I did, because I think a Swiss driver called Gregor Foytek actually overtook me while he was barrel rolling going down the back straight at Brand. So I knew it was pretty bad, and I do remember coming back to the grid, and a piece of Johnny's car, a piece of his rear wing, was actually stuck in between the nose cone and front wing element of my car. Wow. On the when we gridded back up again, it literally like a shark's fin. So yeah, not a great day. Not no. Very difficult day as well for Johnny because of the injuries have sustained, and myself, Johnny, and a number of the guys are close. You might have heard about we'll call ourselves the Rat Pack, or somebody came up with that name. I think it was Perry actually, and we. And I think actually COVID again has struck us on that side, because normally we would at least meet, once a year, and last year's the first time that we haven't been able to do that. So yeah, but yeah, big accident back then, 1989, 1988. So yeah, not good for Johnny, but he recovered very well, and went on to do some great things. So yeah, didn't hold him back.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when we spoke with Perry, he just said he's got just the utmost respect for Johnny, because he said, was it 7 or 8 months later he made his debut for Benetton in Rio in the searing heat, and he said he could barely press the brake pedal without screaming, and because of his injuries. And what an amazing guy! Absolutely incredible. Bert Taylor, founder of BTC Racing, is in. He says, "Say hi to Mark from me, please, Rich." So yeah, hello from Bert Taylor.
Hello, Bert.
Yeah, Bert's not been very well, but he's on the mend. So great to hear that, Bert, and I really hope you're enjoying your holiday, sir. So yeah, moving on, 1989 F3 with Middlebridge, and it was also your first Le Mans, first experience of going to Le Mans. Was that something that you'd been wanting to do, and was there like a little way in there?
Again, going on the theme of being a little bit out of kilter with the norm, decided that we'd go and progress as quickly as possible to becoming a professional racing driver. And that was based on the fact of, for me, a professional is someone who's paid to do their job. Nissan Motor Company came knocking, again, combined with the relationship with Lola, because Lola was supplying the chassis, and offered a seat in the World Sports Car Championship. For me, manufacturer contract, still a young guy, big thing, and enabled me again to be able to support, the F3000 side. And 1989 was a big year for me, because I was doing F3000 World Sports Car Championship, and at that stage I then got the offer to be the test driver for Williams Grand Prix. So as I say, from that season debut in Formula Ford 1684, I had no clue that I'd be sitting in a Formula One car. 1989, 5 years later. Didn't even compute back then, but there you go.
Yeah, amazing. Just that first year at Le Mans, you were with Martin Donnelly and I believe it was Julian Bailey, wasn't it? Now, those guys, I always felt they were on the cusp of a really good drive in F1. Obviously, it didn't come for Julian, although he was with Tyrrell. And obviously, Martin had the awful accident with Lotus in Spain. But yeah, two drivers who never sort of got the credit they deserved, I always thought.
Fantastic drivers. I mean, hugely talented. You could see that in their early years in, Formula Ford, Formula 3. You could see it in the big stuff. I mean, I can tell you, having been a teammate to the pair of them, they were no slouches. It was bloody hard work. Julian probably didn't get the credit he deserved in many ways. Martin went on to do some great things, but unfortunately the accident did pull him back. And a big accident, I mean, I remember going to see him in hospital in Spain, and it's always tough for a driver to visit another driver. But, it's a reality of everything that we signed up for, and, the risk is always there, and it always will be there. That's part and parcel. But, I'm thankful that Martin came through it. I'm pretty sure, though, it gave him a knock on the head, because I don't think he's ever been right since.
In the nicest possible way.
Yeah, exactly. He would know exactly what we're on about. We have a great laugh with him, and Martin, or what we call your man, is part of our gang. So none of us can understand him. I'm sure that his accent's got worse, and as the years have gone by.
Yeah, no, lovely. And when we spoke to Perry, he did say that it takes more than a big crash to keep Martin Donnelly down. So yeah, lovely stuff. Going to get to F1 very quickly. Just want to talk about your win in the great 24-hour race over in France, 1992, alongside Mr. Warwick, who obviously came and had a chat with. And Mr. Yannick Dalmas, again, another very, very good driver. Didn't quite get the drive in F1. What were your memories of 92? Obviously, you pretty much dominated the race, didn't you guys?
Yeah, I mean, 100% win record. I mean, based on the fact I only did one race that year, so yeah, it was quite cool. But listen, it was a situation where I'd signed up to go to McLaren and be the test and reserve driver, and there was some discussion already going on about Peugeot supplying engines to McLaren for the following season. I think at the stage as well, Jean Todt had been watching me in sports cars with Nissan, and seen there was some performance there, and offered me the role alongside Derek and Yannick. Brilliant. I mean, for me as a driver to have that on my CV, immensely proud to have done it with Derek, who I have the great, and most utmost respect for, and also was close to Derek's brother Paul as well, as Paul was coming through the ranks. So it was quite an emotional sort of situation there as well that we went through. And Yannick, a really nice guy. I mean, super talented behind the wheel of a sports car and done some great things, but nice with it, a gent. So yeah, special. Still look back and think about things, what went on during that race, and there was a point during the race that actually I went for the wipers and accidentally turned the ignition off and turned the car off. That was not many people know about that, but it was interesting when they came back on the radio, sort of understanding what went on and having to confess that I think I might have hit the wrong button. But these things happen. But for me, 24-hour Le Mans, very special. To win it once is lovely, and to have it in the CV and so your grandkids can see it in the future. I mean, nice thing to have. Nice trophy as well. So it looks good in the office.
This is just as important as the memories. Just on that, we spoke recently with David Brabham and with Stefan Johansson, who have obviously both won the race as well, and they both said that it was like the pinnacle of their career. Although Stefan did say that leading at Imola, even though he didn't win in front of the Ferrari lot with Ferrari, said that was pretty immense. But they both said it was absolutely fantastic. But we also spoke with Steve Soper and Andy Prio, and they both weren't fans of Le Mans. They didn't like the high speeds and the braking and the dark and all that kind of stuff, which is understandable. But I'm guessing you're on the former side of it. You kind of enjoy it, obviously having won it.
Listen, I loved it. I think it was, a challenging circuit. It still is a challenging circuit. And obviously I'd had some success there with the pole position lap that we did in 1990 with Nissan, with the hand grenade engine. We'd set the outright lap record there, and I think we'd reached 238 miles an hour with the Mulsanne chicanes in. So it was, and I think it's still, I don't know, somebody I'm sure will tell us good, bad, or indifferent whether it is or not, but I think it's still the biggest margin ever for anybody to have pole. I think because we had pole position by over 6 seconds.
That's crazy.
Wow. It was a crazy lap. So, but well documented, that one. So, but Le Mans, look, it's a special race. It's very tough, physically, mentally, but also because it's about a team. There's 3 drivers, sometimes 4, a lot of camaraderie, and people also don't realise it's a huge program. I mean, that program was started 7 months previous to the race. We'd already converted, 2 36-hour simulated races at Paul Ricard in the Peugeot testing. So there's a massive amount of work goes in.
Yeah, goodness, that's something that I think a lot of people don't realise. I certainly didn't. No, that's amazing. Someone's just said, is it true you switched off the radio to concentrate on pole despite the advice of David Price?
In the Nissan Turbo lap, basically I didn't switch it off. I unplugged it. So
right.
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
Basically, well, I was told to bring the car back in, and I'm not normally one to go against team orders, but it was there's the whole run up to that lap what happened, and in the end I was so sick and tired of it, I just unplugged it and got on with it. Luckily it went the right way and we came back with pole position, although I still got my backside kicked by the Japanese because they weren't happy. So they were very, very concerned that the engine was going to blow up. So it wouldn't have been a great thing, but it was the first Japanese manufacturer to be on pole as well. So it was big news for them. Yeah,
and obviously they were quite happy. Once you'd stuck it on pole, of course. Once they calmed down. So no, excellent, great, and obviously you raced there quite a few times, but 92, fantastic. I do remember it as well. I remember saying there was like two British guys who'd won Le Mans, so yeah, I was happy as an 11-year-old. Into F1. Obviously, you mentioned you've been into Williams as a test driver. That must have felt fantastic getting in the F1 car for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I think my first time in an F1 car was actually on an airfield, just doing straight line testing, but it was still a significant stepping stone career-wise to get into an F1 car and to be, gainfully employed by Williams as a test driver in that role. And I think I was really at the sort of forefront in the first generation of test drivers.
Right.
I would love to see that come back, because I think it would be so worthwhile for teams to be in a situation where they can develop drivers and pick from, the qualities that they have as these youngsters, and seeing them actually develop in-house. But the funding element is, taking that to a degree of not being economic anymore. Although saying that, I'm sure they're spending very similar money on the simulations and that side of things. I think back then, I probably did more miles, and I'm pretty confident in saying it. I probably did more miles than any other Grand Prix driver at the time in an active ride suspension car, and also developing semi-automatic gearboxes. That was between actually Williams and McLaren. So I'm pretty sure I've probably got more miles under my belt than anyone out there on that side of things, which is good and bad. Great when it worked, but when an active ride suspension car failed, it was pretty memorable. So not
for sure. Wow, amazing. So obviously, that Williams test, was it that opened the door for the drive with Brabham? The first sort of full drive, as it were, in '91.
Yes, because all my testing at Williams, obviously I was out there when all the guys were there doing the same thing, and was getting noticed that I was putting in some good performances, and they could see the performance on track, and getting some great feedback internally. So I got the approach from Brabham. In hindsight, it was a mistake, because, I was a youngster. I'd sort of looking at the situation of being a Grand Prix driver, and to have an offer, it was like, okay, yeah, great, brilliant. This is everything I've always wanted, and I jumped at it. But I should have actually stayed put, because I was holding a 3-year contract at Williams. They didn't want me to go. They asked me to stay, but I felt that I knew better and didn't have anybody around me at the time to sort of advise me differently, and decided to go to Brabham. And it was a big mistake, but it's one that I made and had to make the most of it. But looking back now, put it this way: if I was advising one of my drivers, I'd be advising them not to go and do what I did, which is probably why I do what I do, because I've got so many areas of mistakes that I've made that I can give them some good advice.
No, sure. But there was a points finish that year, and you were alongside Martin Brundle, who sort of seems to follow you around, or you follow him. I'm not sure how it goes, but so you were there. Then you were a McLaren test driver for '92. Again, just being in the car, and as you say, doing the development work for that. And '93, back in full time with the Ligier team. And I've actually got a picture you sent just up there of you in that. That's up there. That always felt like a car that was really close to being really, really good. And obviously, you had your podiums with it. What were your thoughts on the Ligier car? Because and it also looked brilliant as well.
You've just actually reminded me, because actually you're right. I scored my first World Championship point in my first season of Grand Prix. So I'm just reflecting on that from seeing George Russell do his first points. So I guess in a way, we probably fast tracked that as well, considering the car was a pile of junk. But there you go. The Ligier, you're right, was a great car. The reason behind that, firstly, I got the drive off the back of the McLaren testing duties, for exactly the same reasons why Brabham offered me the role off the back of Williams. But I think I was also the first British driver ever to be signed by Ligier in the history of the team. So for an all-French team, that was pretty big back then.
Yeah.
Being called roast beef was the norm. But the back end of the Williams was stitched onto the Ligier. So, rear suspension, gearbox, same engine, obviously, with a Renault, and some of the little nuances of the Williams was on the back end of that car. So it was a good car, no two ways about it. And you saw that. I mean, both myself, Martin, I took 2 podiums, and he took 1 that year. So, it had some great speed in it, and a few little areas that it could have improved upon, but overall it was a solid car, and I'll always be thankful to the team and the car because it gave me those podiums standing up there with some legends and some greats.
Yes, that leads me nicely on to that. You took your podiums there. Was it third on on your debut with the team down in South Africa, and then later on that year third again at Hockenheim. That first podium you shared it with some guys called Prost and Senna, and Hockenheim you shared it with Prost and some German fella, Michael something. That must have been pretty cool. I mean, that's some very, very good company to be keeping on the podium.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'd got to know Senna quite well because I was basically the test and reserve driver at McLaren for him and Gerhard Berger. So we'd spent a lot of time together over that previous season. I think Ayrton was very happy for me, standing up there on the podium. I think he was actually, genuinely happy that it seen me do that. I was obviously elated. And also, I remember Gerard Ducarouge, unfortunately now has passed, but he did that trick with the saber with the champagne, taking the neck of the bottle off. Yeah, well, and one of those things that always stick again in my memory bank. But yeah, listen, great days. Also sharing it with Martin, teammate. We're close. Similar names, live in a similar area. He also comes from a background of car dealers as well. His dad John was a car dealer, so yeah, so some heady heights for us back then in '93.
Yeah, lovely. Very good question again from Milano. Very quickly, what was the best piece of advice you had from Ayrton? Did he give advice or was he very coy?
Yeah. He was not one to give advice, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
He was a very focused, very strong in terms of psychology and making sure you knew where your place was. So he didn't really give you advice, but at the same time, I think as I say, he was happy. He was happy for seeing the achievement. Because I think he also knew what that meant. He'd been there previously in terms of his achievements. He'd gone on to do so much more, obviously, but to get onto the podium in F1, as you can see today, I mean, you can look back and you can count, on a couple of hands how many guys have been on the podium more than once. The numbers start to dwindle quite quickly.
Sure, yeah.
So just to do it the first time is a really great feeling, but to do it a few times is lovely. So yeah. Good times.
No, excellent. One very quick thing. I do remember there was an accident you had at Silverstone in the wet, and the McLarens went round you like that as you were in the middle of the track. That must have been a heart stopper. I mean, even now when I see it, you got to get out of the car and you give it that little look. Because there was spray everywhere.
Yeah, that was typical British Grand Prix, British driver trying to do more than my ability would allow me to do. And actually, if someone's got the data, because I can remember going back through it back in those days. I was the quickest through the speed trap before that corner there by something like 12 miles an hour. So I was overcommitted. And consequently, that overcommitment didn't allow me to come out the exit of the corner facing the right way. So, but that was British Grand Prix. You were there to get on and do what you wanted to do. And looking back now, getting out the car and seeing the two McLarens split me was definitely an interesting, focal point. Very, very lucky, very fortunate they did what they did. And I'm pretty sure they would actually feel the same about it as well. So hitting a stationary car at those speeds is not going to be a nice thing.
No, absolutely. Everyone walked away. That's the main thing. Just want to move on very quickly. 1994 to Tyrrell. I think I've read somewhere you said that actually wasn't a bad car. You said it was a pretty decent machine to drive that year.
Yeah, it was a good little car, but unfortunately, we just didn't have the budget to run at the levels that would, do it more justice. Had some great guys with us. It was a bit of a battle for me because my teammate Ukio Katayama was probably about a stone and a half lighter than me. Not that I was fat back then, but I'm saying, back then he was incredibly small, and we never had any balanced performance sort of thing. We never had any situation where the weight was compensated for. So the driver's weight was quite a heavy penalty in terms of performance, and there was nothing you could do about it. It was, other than me sort of losing an arm or something to make good. So it was always a bit frustrating to look at the data and see that you come through the corner, quicker, but actually when you got out onto the straight, your acceleration was down because it just put in extra weight. But
sure.
Several races we had some great results on the cards, and things let us down. So brake failure in Imola. Stuff like that, and purely down to budget. We just didn't have the operational budget there to make things right. So the brakes exploded because they had been skimmed twice already, rather than putting new brakes on. The carbon brakes have been re-skimmed and eventually fouled. So those kind of things, wouldn't even happen today. Today's F1 teams, they just wouldn't tolerate it. But back then, those kind of things went on quite a lot.
Yeah, different era. You mentioned Imola 94. I want to touch on it very quickly. Obviously, very difficult weekend for everyone. Spoke to David Brabham, who was obviously the teammate of Roland Ratzenberger on that weekend, and he said that after Ruben's accident on the Friday, I believe it was, in practice, when he could have been far more seriously hurt than he was, he said there was a very strange atmosphere all weekend, but he wasn't sure if it was there at the time or if his hindsight sort of made it very funny. Did you feel anything different that weekend?
That weekend in particular was quite tough for all of us because there was we had the Rubens Barrichello accident, we had JJ Leto had an accident, we lost Roland, and of course we lost Ayrton. And I think for me, actually, the thing that stood out in my mind was the driver's briefing on Sunday morning. Back then, you'd have a driver's briefing, FIA driver's briefing on a Sunday morning, and Senna was quite vocal, and it was almost sort of out of kilter for him. There was something that was niggling him, and you could feel it in the room. And I think that set the tone. And there was something a little bit eerie about the whole weekend. It just didn't run smoothly. And of course, for all of us, huge loss, two great drivers. Roland I'd known as well, coming up through the junior years. He was a similar age. And, and then the loss of Senna. Roland kind of like, we'd lost somebody in Formula One, but it never got quite the level of media coverage that obviously happened around the death of Senna. And I think that sort of took things to another level. And off the back of that as well, don't forget, we then had the Will Tevers came in for safety reasons to try and keep the wheel attached to the monocoque. The corner was changed at Imola. There was a lot of rebound off the back of that. But huge loss to the sport. And do think back and just think what would have Senna done, later years after. What would have been manageable and achievable, and I think would have been a huge amount. Because definitely he was a genius behind the wheel. There was no two ways about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, seismic weekend for F1, and obviously the changes that have happened since. No, thank you for talking about that. I know it's not a nice subject. Thank you. Very quickly, the following year into McLaren, obviously Nigel was in there, and either the car was too small for him or he was too big for the car. I'm not sure which way round it was. But he decided to call it quits, and you got into McLaren. What were your thoughts on that car? Because that car seems to get a bit of flack. Was it as bad as everyone seems to say it was, or?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'd come off the back of Tyrrell, and I was again sort of having one of those times of contemplating what was going to be next, and had not really sort of fulfilled my expectations because budget had held us back in terms of results, even though we'd had the podium with Tyrrell. which was nice as well because it was the first podium for Yamaha Motor Company as an engine supplier, and actually I'd scored the first World Championship point as well back in the Brabham days. So yeah, got great fond memories with Yamaha. But the opportunity came back up with McLaren because Ron basically came down to see me and said, look, why don't you put yourself back in a situation with us again? You've been in a poor performance team and it doesn't serve you any good. So come back and join us as test and reserve driver again. So I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, actually, I've done it already before. Let's try and rebuild again. I didn't really know at the time that I think already there was some friction in the camp, and the likelihood was that I was probably going to be at some stage driving in a Grand Prix for McLaren. I quite clearly didn't know that because when I negotiated with Ron, I negotiated on the basis of being a test driver and a test driver money. So my level of negotiation and leverage went out the window when I was told that you're going to be in the car for a Grand Prix. So right. These things you learn as you go along in life. But there you are. Ron was a sharp man. The Nigel story's been sort of well documented over the years. Nigel and McLaren are the guys who know most about that, obviously. So and to be quite frank with you, I didn't have any effect on me. I had my job that I was going to do for the team, and then when the opportunity came up, I took it. And I think considering the car, we did okay. We did supported McLaren and Mercedes Benz. It was a debut year again back in the sport. Out-qualified Hakkinen at Estoril, where of course Senna had been out-qualified by Hakkinen at Estoril as well. So that was sort of a measurement, and I think the guys internally in the team could see that was a big performance. It was a little bit of a hindrance at times for me because I never left foot braked in a Formula One car, and so the car was designed around that initially. So I was sort of conventional, but in saying that, the day that I out-qualified Hakkinen, he had the car changed back to right foot braking overnight. So it definitely phased him. That I do laugh about that with Mika at times.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, good times, good days, and big soft spot for McLaren as a team.
Yeah, super, brilliant. Just very quickly, because I'm conscious of the time. Very quick, you moved over to IndyCar, '96. Was it 5 seasons with the Pac West team? Very quickly, firstly, how did it come about? And secondly, alongside Mo Gugelmin, who's brilliant. I've got a picture of him here as well, in the Leighton House. Brilliant car. How did that move come about?
So I actually was going to Sauber. That's where I was heading.
Right.
I'd signed a heads of agreement to go to Sauber for '96. Ford were very, very strong on making that happen. But unfortunately for me, in that sort of interim period, the guy called Mateschitz turned up and bought an investment in the team. And, as we all know, he's the boss of Red Bull. But his first sort of equity stake was taken within Sauber, and one of the conditions was that he wanted to choose the other driver in the team, and that driver had to be a Grand Prix winner. And at the time, the only guy that was out there in the market left who had won a Grand Prix and didn't have a seat was Johnny Herbert.
Yeah.
So Johnny got the seat, and I was told it wasn't going to be me. And I got a bit disheartened with Formula One at that stage and just decided, you know what, I'm going to look at something different. So off the back of doing all the work I'd done with McLaren and Mercedes turned around and said to me, look, if you want to go to IndyCar, we've got great relationships. And because we've been really happy with what you've done for us, we're going to give you an engine deal to take to an IndyCar team and, an engine supply program. So that was the platform I used. So I went to Pac West. We couldn't do Mercedes engines in year one because they were still under contract with Ford. But as you would have seen, come '97, they went to Mercedes Benz, and again, the rest is history. We had some great wins there and some big successes.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those wins was the one at Portland. I actually put a post out about it, I think, last week. I remember watching it. at the time and going absolutely bonkers. I was up late and I don't know why. I remember watching it and what a last lap. Yeah, with you and around and Raul Borzell, wasn't it?
You must have been 15 or 16 by then, so you were probably allowed to stay up late.
16. Well, I wasn't allowed, but I did. sorry, Mum and Dad. I wasn't doing my homework. Sorry.
Yeah, it was a good race. I think it went down as the closest finish in the history of kart racing, as it was called then, Championship Auto Racing Teams. And I think Gilles de Ferran, definitely felt that he'd won the race. And I think we'd just edged him out by just under about 2 inches in terms of length, crossing the line. Just out-dragged him off the last corner. Yeah, it was good. I mean, it was great for me because we just lost the previous race.
Detroit.
Run out of fuel in the last corner on the last lap.
Yeah.
And that was going to be the win, and it got taken off of us. And Portland to go there and win in the team's backyard because the guy who owned the team, Bruce McCall, came from that area, Seattle. So it was his kind of home race. So it was a great one.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I believe was it Detroit? Was that Greg Moore won it? Obviously, we lost Greg. Awful accident. He's another one of those what if stories because he was very good. Very, very good.
Hugely talented young driver and a great guy as well. So another big loss in our motorsport world.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before we move on to the BTCC, again, very conscious of the time. I've got to bring it up. The accident in Rio. It was only your second race. Every time I see it, I wince. Was it the brake failure on that one?
Yeah, it was a brake hub that exploded. And a part on the car that should actually not have been on there as well. So that was also something that was a little bit of a tough one to accept. But the brakes failed. We hit the wall at 198 miles an hour to 122 G impact.
Makes a 51 G sound a bit
yeah. People talk about all these incidents and stuff, but I'm like, wait till you hit concrete. And it was a concrete wall. Yeah, when you even Grosjean's, I don't think that was anywhere even up to that side. So 122 G in a concrete at 198 miles an hour is pretty significant. But the only thing that I remember all of it because I never got knocked out. I should have been a heavyweight boxer. I think I would have been really successful. But the thing as well that I remember is actually getting out of the car and then the safety team coming around and me telling the safety team to tell Big Mo, to tell Maurizio via the team that my brakes failed and to give him a heads up.
Oh, wow.
And he actually, when the restart of the race took place, he had the same failure. So the only reason he was lucky is that he got brake checked by Emerson Fittipaldi on the back straight. And Emo had given him a little dab on the brakes and Mo had to back up on them. And when he went on the brakes, they fouled, and he was lucky to get up to the retaining wall and slowed the car down on that perimeter wall all the way around. So, So Mo owes me. He definitely owes me a drink or two.
Yeah, well, see, he needs to get himself back to the UK, sort that out of it, doesn't he? No, again, thank you for talking about it. It's never nice talking about accidents and whatnot. Obviously, you've done other races, other events, going back to Le Mans, with David Brabham. I'm going to skim over that because obviously very conscious of the time. I don't want to keep it too long. BTCC, I know a lot of people who follow the Hard Compound are BTCC fans and they want to know about this. I remember being very excited when I said Mark Blundell was going to be in the BTCC. I actually sent a message to one of my friends and it was all in capitals. I was like, Mark Blundell's in the because it was a big thing and it raised the profile of the series for sure. Was it always something that you wanted to do, or was it just something that came up over the period of a few months, or what was the story there?
So I tested a touring car once with when I was at MG Rover. And I'd always looked at the British Touring Car Championship and had fond memories of it because it's fantastic racing. Absolutely. There's no two ways about that. What actually happened is that I was never intended to race in a front-wheel drive car.
Right.
So I was in the middle of doing a deal to go and drive one of the Subarus. So that was where I
Okay.
was heading, and that was the deal that I was putting in play. And to drive a rear-wheel drive car would have been a lot easier for me because that was where I was confident and understood what was underneath me. Unfortunately, the Subaru team, and again, it's sort of been documented, kind of went downhill.
Yeah. The B&O,
And
isn't it?
they had some issues, and it wasn't going to be possible for me to take our partners, which were HP and Intel. So I had some, big global blue chip
Big names.
partners that were on the journey with me. I couldn't take them into that environment. It wasn't going to be the right thing to do.
Right.
So I had the commitment from the partners. I didn't have a race team at that point. I knew Sean Hollenby from days of old, and I rung up Sean and said, "Look, I'm in a bit of a hole. Is there anything we can do and work together and make it happen?" Of which we did. The only thing is that it was a front-wheel drive car, and it just didn't fit. I just couldn't get my head around it. I know people look at it and they go, "Oh, you've done this and you've done that, and you should be able to drive a racing car," but it doesn't actually work that way.
No.
As you'll see if you went and looked at people's results, if they've gone into DTM, many Formula One guys have gone in and not succeeded. You'll see people. Yeah, I mean, lots of it. DC, Hakkinen, they never had the same level of success. If you talk to somebody like, Andy Prio, if you talk to Matt Neal going to V8 supercars and not being able to, get on and do what he did normally in a front-wheel drive car, it's the same thing. And it was the same for me. I just couldn't get my head around it. And also, I was running the business. I didn't have the time to actually dedicate to it, which also was an error. But at the same time, I still enjoyed it. And there were times when I felt like, no, it wasn't really going in the right direction because it was frustrating. And frustrating because it was, my worst season of motor racing ever in terms of results. And never, ever been that part of the grid for so long during the season. So it was difficult to swallow. So, at the end of it all, I just decided, look, if I can't put myself in a rear-wheel drive car that's competitive, then I won't do it again. Hence why we look to do something with the team, and that's been going from strength to strength.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a very quick question from Den Devlin. Evening, Den. He said, how much of a challenge is the BTCC to even a seasoned driver, especially a driver more used to open wheel racing? Was it purely the front wheel and rear wheel drive difference? Was that the biggest thing? And not it's close.
Yeah. No, I mean, close racing isn't a problem. I was doing close racing in Formula 4 1600 with some of the best, so that's not an issue. And I think if anybody knows me on track, they'll also tell you that I'm not the easiest guy in the world as well. I mean, I'm quite happy to go toe to toe with someone. It wasn't that. It was a case of not being confident and not being able to understand a front wheel drive car. I had a very strong teammate. Jake Hill was hugely talented. As much as Jake would try and help me, and again, I don't left foot brake. So that's, the only time I'd left foot braked was driving an oval because I had to. There was no other way of doing it. But in conventional way of driving, it hurt me on that side of things with a front wheel drive car as well. So it was stacked against me and not for me. I'm sure with a different car as well and another season under my belt, I would have progressed. I'm pretty sure that would have been the case, but it didn't happen, and it is what it is. So it'll be in the book.
Yeah. Looking forward to the book. Just very quickly, MB Motorsport. Obviously, you had Jake and Sam Osborne last year in the Civic, and Esme Hawkey, absolutely terrific young driver. Is doing very, very, she's doing very promising things out in the DTM. I'm pretty sure she could be a future BTCC driver if she wanted to. And obviously, moving into this year, the new Focus looks absolutely brilliant. It's a proven race winner, and you've got Ollie Jackson on board as well. It's sort of going. Is it all going as planned? Obviously, with the Motorbase guys as well. Is it all going as hoped?
Yeah, I mean, Motorbase is doing a fantastic job. They're a great operating team, and it's slightly different now in terms of its ownership, and there's a little bit of differential in the way that it's run, but the core of it's still there. Are we happy? We are happy-ish. I would like to be a little bit stronger in terms of results, and I don't think anyone would disagree with me. I think we're all aiming for that. Everybody there is pointing in that direction to achieve it. So I think Ollie's had a tough one because a lot of things have gone against him, and it's hurt his results, and I don't think he's yet to show what he can deliver. But we've seen it at times, and it's there.
I actually spoke with Ollie during the week, and he was very frustrated after Snetterton. He said it was one of those. Yeah, I think race 3 was good, but he said he was so frustrated with the other.
Yeah, and that's sometimes how it runs, and you just got to get out of that and pull yourself from it and move on. And I'm sure he will. And Jake is doing a great job. Jake also has a couple of situations where it's cost him a couple of points here and there. But if you keep knocking in solid weekends like Alton Park, you'll soon make inroads into the championship, and he's already doing it. He's gone from 5th to 4th, and I think we're quite strong in the manufacturers. We're only a little bit behind BMW. Yeah. So there's a lot to play for, and half the season at least still to run. So there's a lot of things can happen yet.
Yeah, and it seems to be going in the right direction, and I don't think any of us would be surprised when MB Motorsport get that first win, and it'll be a very, very popular win. Just got a couple of little fun questions just before we wrap up, because I know you've got to get off. Toughest driver you ever raced against?
Toughest driver ever raced against? That's
there's been a few, hasn't there?
No. You know what? I'd probably go back to the early days and the driver called David Coyne. Right. So that's probably going to stump a lot of people, but
there'll be a few Google searches.
Yeah, there are probably people thinking about Senners and Prosts and Schumachers, but no, David Coyne.
No, brilliant. No, that's great, because obviously Ayrton Senna always said it was Terry Fullerton, wasn't it? And it was just those early days. It was always the first, those early days of fun. No, brilliant. Favorite car you ever drove, racing wise?
Race car would be a car that I never raced in a Grand Prix. So it would be FW14B Williams that I was invited to go back and test for Williams when I was a Grand Prix driver at Brabham. Kind of unheard of, being a driver for one team and testing for another. But that was a day that it dropped on me that I'd made a mistake at Brabham, because we just completed the Italian Grand Prix, stayed on to do testing 2 days after, and I went round Imola 2.2 seconds quicker on race tyres than what I did in qualifying tyres with the Brabham. So that gave me an insight into the mistake I'd made. But there you are. That's the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah, my favourite car. Your racing hero, or someone that you looked up to when you were young in racing?
Ronnie Peterson.
Oh, excellent answer. Excellent answer. Huge loss. We spoke with Mario, obviously, who was his teammate, and he said, that was one of the worst days of his life when Ronnie went, and what a driver. Favourite circuit you've driven?
Spa-Francorchamps, like many. Yeah. And then it would be closely followed up with Road America, Elkhart Lake.
Oh, yeah, good shout. I do like that circuit. It does look fun. Last one, your favourite moment from your career?
I don't have one. There's so many that are just box tickers. So, winning a 500-mile race in IndyCar was fantastic.
Yeah.
First World Championship point, first podium in F1, winning Le Mans. Yeah, winning your first Formula Ford race as well. So there's so many of them. But, lucky that I'm still here to talk about them. That's the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to wrap it up now, Mark. I know you've got to get away. Just one last question one last comment from Andrew Edwards. Thank you, Andrew. It's great to see you still involved in the BTCC. His experience is immense and a truly top driver. I think we can all agree on that.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very, very much for coming to join us, Mark. I know you're busy, so really appreciate your time, and we'll let you get on with the rest of your evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Bye-bye.